Good evening, welcome to The Big Fight. On the show tonight, a completely unexpected but very significant announcement from Rajnath Singh, the Defence Minister. In Pokhran, on the death anniversary of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the new Defence Minister says circumstances will decide whether India will alter its doctrine of no first use of nuclear weapons. Now, the statement, which comes a day after the Prime Minister announced the creation of the post of Chief of Defence Staff, is perhaps another indicator of how this government wants to have a strident defence posture. But what are the consequences of making such statements in a deeply vitiated environment that we are in? Now, this comes on a day when the government has announced that it is in the process of removing restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, that's all very well and certainly welcome in schools and government offices which will be reopened. But what about the release of political leaders? What about the right to political dissent? And finally, one of the big promises made by the Prime Minister at Red Fort yesterday on Independence Day was about the high jump needed to take India to a $5 trillion economy. Now, the Congress party says that the Prime Minister is grandstanding and that the announcements are unrealistic. So there's a lot to discuss on the show tonight, lots of key debates. We'll be reflecting on Kashmir, the nuclear doctrine and the economy. But our overall title for this program, The Tough Decision on Jammu and Kashmir is Done, is a change in nuclear, no first use. That doctrine, is that up next? I'd like to introduce my panelists at this stage before inviting them to make their 1-minute introductory remarks. Very privileged to have Vipin Narang with us, one of the foremost thinkers on nuclear issues. He's at MIT in the United States. He's with us now. Sagarika Ghosh with us, Desh Ratan Nigam, Pavan Verma, Professor Arun Kumar, Bharat Karnad, another very fine thinker on nuclear issues. We're also joined by the Shiv Sena leader, Priyanka Chopra, Pratap Singh Bajwa of the Congress, and General Deepak Kapoor, the former Army Chief. Thank you all very much for being with us. We call this the first punch. You've got exactly 1 minute for your introductory remarks. After that, I'll interrupt and stop you from speaking.
Thank you, Vishnu. Is it a change in policy? No, but it is a policy statement. And it is the highest level injection of ambiguity about India's future adherence to what it has strictly adhered to, as Defence Minister Singh mentioned, a no first use policy. It will not be the first state to use nuclear weapons in a conflict. So what did he say? He's standing there in Pokhran, where India tested nuclear weapons in 1974 and 1998, on the 1-year death anniversary of Prime Minister Vajpayee, from whom the no first use policy is inherited. And he says, we have strictly adhered to this, but what happens in the future depends on circumstances, which suggests that India, for the first time, I think you have a sitting official in an official capacity, not at a book launch or off the cuff, very clearly stating that India's adherence to no first use is neither indefinite nor necessarily absolute. And it is true that India has had this no first use policy for 20 years. It is also true that from the very beginning, there has been discomfort at the highest levels with an absolute no first use policy. People forget that in 2000, Prime Minister Vajpayee himself said, if you think we're going to sit back and wait while Pakistan drops a bomb on us, how can a sitting Prime Minister do that if they know that a nuclear weapon is going to kill Indian citizens first? So the issue of preemption has always been a point of discomfort.
Right. Your 1 minute is up. Bharat Karnad, go ahead.
Yeah, at the time that we drafted the doctrine in the first National Security Advisory Board, we were very certain what the point was about the no first use. We were preempted in a sense by Prime Minister Vajpayee saying in the suo motu statement in Parliament that they would go in for an NFU. And that's the reason why we included it. Actually, a doctrine is merely a guideline, for God's sake. It's not an operational directive. And this is the sort of mistake and confusion that the American academic industry and the non-proliferation lobbies in America and elsewhere have propagated over the years. Now, because it's not an operational directive, you have the latitude to change at any time the circumstances required to do so. So, nuclear weapons are actually weapons of war, and they'll be used in an initial first use or in retaliatory mode, depending on the circumstances. So there's no bar whatsoever on the Indian government's use first use of nuclear weapons. And what Home Minister Rajnath Singh, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said is nothing new, and is merely reiterating what's already there and has been repeatedly stated by the government.
General Deepak Kapoor, your first remarks. 1 minute, sir. 1 minute, go ahead.
Vishnu, no first use is a policy that we followed for the last 20 years, and I think as a peace-loving nation, it has held us in good stead. It is a principle that we have followed, but it doesn't mean that we are totally tied down to it and are inflexible should circumstances change. To the extent that the Raksha Mantri has said that should circumstances change, there may be a desire to reconsider it. Yes, that flexibility must be retained as a nuclear power should the circumstances require so. So to that extent, I find nothing wrong, and this is a statement which is in consonance with the declared policy that we've been following.
Okay. Pavan Verma, you can pick your topic, the nuclear issue, Kashmir or economics. We're looking at all three, but you've got only 1 minute. You can do all three if you like.
Well, since you are beginning with the statement made by the Raksha Mantri, I will also comment on it briefly. Yes. You see, national defense is a non-negotiable priority. The world knows that we have nuclear weapons. We also have the triad launchability. We have now surveillance abilities to see if someone else is scrambling to use weapons before us. Now, given that, we have also been one of the prime movers in the world for nuclear non-proliferation, for a nuclear weapons-free world. Given that, I think we need to adhere to our announced policy of no first use, because that retains within it the inherent right for self-defense. So, if circumstances require us, although our policy is of no first use, in a retaliatory gesture or as the first priority of defense to use our weapons, we will. What we should not introduce in this policy, especially today as a responsible nuclear weapons power with an impeccable record, is any ambiguity with regard to our approach to the use of nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Without ambiguity, we don't tweak it, we don't give it interpretational
1 minute
maneuverability.
No ambiguity is what you call for. Sagarika, the other two issues which we are looking at today, the issue of Kashmir, there has been somewhat of a restoration of rights. Schools will be reopened on Monday, government offices will be reopened, but political dissent, is there political dissent? If so, where is it? We don't know because we can't hear it. Leaders not out in the open. Your thoughts of the situation in Kashmir, and if you like, your thoughts on the economy and the remarks made by the Prime Minister during Independence Day.
I'd also like to pull back and speak a little bit about the nuclear comment made today by the Defence Minister, and also link this to Kashmir. You know, at a time when 7 million Indian citizens of the world's largest democracy are under lockdown, they do not have access to phones, they do not have access to the internet, they cannot go to school, they cannot voice their opinion, their leaders are under house arrest. This issue is coming to the United Nations, which has not taken up Kashmir since 1971 ceasefire declaration after the war. Is this the time the responsible nuclear power that is India should saber rattle on no first use? Is this the time to up the nuclear ante? The Prime Minister very responsibly did not mention Pakistan in his Independence Day speech. He has not mentioned Pakistan at all. In fact, he's talking about a compact with Kashmir, Naya Kashmir, the new compact with Kashmir. Where is that compact? That is where the focus of the government needs to be. You know, reach out to the people, talk to the people, build the domestic constituency. Why nuclear when 7 million
why
are
nuclear
under
today
lockdown?
when so many people in Kashmir are under lockdown? Deshrathan Nigam, go ahead, sir.
See, let me first touch upon your nuclear, since you started with the no first use. I think that was an inheritance from our cultural traditions that we never attacked, and therefore this policy was there. But at the same time, a NFU, which I call nuclear no first use policy, cannot be frozen in time. It has to be flexible, as everybody says so. And that doctrine principles, we may not know the real operative principles in public domain, but I am sure they have a clear laid down procedure and with the government. So that aspect is very clear. And BJP also in 2014 manifesto, I clearly remember, they said they would, they promised to revise and update India's nuclear doctrine. So that is, you can see a continuity of that same statement what Raksha Mantri said today. Now coming back to Kashmir, see, nobody can deny it's a momentous decision taken by the parliament, and there was some kind of disturbance expected, but that we have not seen on a large scale where people could have come out despite the curfew in the past. But you have a rogue nation next to you. So that, especially the BAT commandos who were killed, and some of them.
Okay, your 1 minute is up. I think you are trying to link the situation in Kashmir to the situation on the line of control. Professor Arun Kumar, among the points mentioned by the Prime Minister yesterday was the need to high jump, to use his words, to a $5 trillion economy that needed a 100,000 crore rupee investment in infrastructure for starters, but comes at a time when the economy is in the doldrums for various reasons on various parameters. Was this grandstanding? Your thoughts?
So, finally it's admitted that the economy is doing rather poorly. All the data indicates that. Now, the rate of growth currently, nominal rate of growth is roughly about 6 to 7%. It's not 12% as assumed in the budget, but you need 16% to reach a $5 trillion economy in the coming 5 years. So we are nowhere close to it. Towards the end, we would need to be rising at about 22%. If you're not able to go at 5.8 or 7-8% nominal, we're not going to reach 22%. This 100 lakh crores of investment would have implied that in 5 years, if we to do that, we need to spend 20 lakh crores every year. This budget actually cuts back on capital expenditure from 9.2 lakh crores last year to 8.5 lakh crores. We are nowhere close to 20 lakh crores. We should have risen to at least 15 to 16 lakh crores so that in the last year we could have done 25 lakh crores, So in other words, we are nowhere close to achieving either the 100 lakh crore target or the $5 trillion economy. If we continue to rise at 12%, which is what's stated in the budget, we'd only go to $4.2 trillion, not $5 trillion. And the rupee will devalue, and as the rupee devalues, we'll have to grow at even faster rate. So I don't see any sign that in spite of the stock market being at a record high, in spite of a rate cut by...
It's not at a record high now.
Well, it's come down, but still very high. But the interest rate cut by the RBI.
Point taken. You feel that it's unrealistic at this stage for some of the reasons that you've mentioned over there. Priyanka Chopra, Shiv Sena leader. The three things we are talking about: the nuclear issue, we are talking about the economy, and we are talking about Kashmir. Your introductory remarks, 1 minute before I interrupt. Go ahead.
So firstly, with regards to what the Defence Minister spoke today, I don't think there's any ambiguity, and I don't think there's anyone who is rattled, because this has been the position of India as such, that we will not be the aggressors, we will not be the first ones to attack, but if we have to defend, we will do our best to ensure that we defend our lands and our people, and that has been part of every national security policy. So that, I think, is, someone was saying, someone was calling it rattling, saber rattling, etc. I think it's irrelevant to what he has said. There is no policy change, but there's a very clear indicator that if circumstances change, we would not mind changing the no first use policy. Now, with regards to Kashmir, of course, everyone would want normalcy to return. We have witnessed a momentous occasion in history which could have led to protests, which people largely believed could have led to that. But 12 days have seen that, and whatever reports we are getting, have seen that there haven't been any major protests, except for one which BBC was trying to show. And beyond that, there haven't been major protests happening. And I think, as far as law and order is concerned, we must all cooperate to ensure that peace prevails, and the people of Kashmir are,
peace prevails.
Comfortable with the idea of merging with, living without the Article 370.
All right. Okay. Pratap Singh Bajwa of the Congress Party, thanks very much for joining us. You've got 1 minute for your first punch. Go ahead, sir.
See, whatever all the other panelists have said, this is a very clear-cut policy on what Rajnath Singh ji has said. India has been always saying we will not be the first aggressors, but we should also not be found napping. So, as the rhetoric, if you closely watch what is happening in Pakistan, of late the Pakistani Prime Minister, he started to, in a way, indirectly threaten India. So I think so the right response has already come. Okay, we will not be found wanting. If the need is there, we would be there. So on Kashmir, I would like to say that elected leaders of Kashmir, there are 3 chief ministers, at least 2 chief ministers are there who are under house arrest. The government of India must allow opposition leaders, they are all responsible people, to go there and see for themselves what is the situation there. So one is that. Number 3, you spoke about the economy. Economy is already showing a downturn. Automobile industry. You also, the third issue was the economy. So economy is showing a downturn. Automobile industry, almost sales are 30% down.
Okay. So the economy, you believe, is in trouble. You pointed out one aspect. We're going to start our debate now. I'm going to begin by looking at the entire nuclear issue. The fact that Rajnath Singh made these remarks fairly unexpected in terms of timing, but as we've clearly established, nothing incredibly new in what he did say. I think the timing issue is important. But Mr. Bajwa, let me come to you first with that. I'm rather surprised when you said that Rajnath Singh said the right thing, perhaps the obvious thing, because nuclear no first use has always been a cornerstone of the previous government's philosophy, of the UPA's philosophy, of what the Congress believes in. Why do you now believe that first use, a proactive first use policy is the right way forward? Has the Congress changed its mind?
No, Congress has, see, I am talking as an individual, I am no spokesman of the Congress at the present moment. You had requested for my participation, I am there. Belonging to a border state of Punjab, which has seen so many invasions through hundreds and thousands of years, what the rhetoric that the Prime Minister of Pakistan is continuing with, we have to be careful. And so that's why I said, whatever the Defence Minister said,
what the Defence Minister has said, irrespective of the view, the official view of the Congress party, is that because there is a lack of clarity in the Congress on nuclear no first use?
See, no, please don't take the party view in. I am talking as an individual.
But sir, how do you distance yourself from your party,
to a border
sir?
State.
You are a senior leader of the Congress.
Always is
your
is
views reflect the perspective of the party.
No,
sir.
I am not I am not distancing my. See, how can you not stand with the national government on this?
All right.
You will have to stand. What else do you say?
Very important. Interesting comments.
Pakistani Prime Ministers, if the Pakistan Prime Ministers every single day is if the Pakistani Prime Minister every single day in the Parliament of Pakistan is trying to show to India that we are a nuclear weapon state and we can use a nuclear weapon or a bomb anytime, so India has to be ready.
Okay.
It cannot be found napping like Japan was found in the Second World War.
Nuclear
you have to be prepared.
Yeah, I think there's a slight mistake in what Mr. Bajwa is saying, is that the Pakistani Prime Minister is threatening a nuclear conflagration. I don't think that has happened, but the Pakistani Prime Minister
warned of the dangers of
he's being bellicose. He's going to he's gone to POK and he's spoken about war. But why do we want to go down to Pakistan's level? Why do we want to stoop down to the level of violent rhetoric for violent rhetoric? The fact is, the Indian position so far has been a principled one, that we have undertaken a change in our domestic law.
But it's a position which obviously leaders from the Congress believe that needs to change as well. That the Home Minister's views need to be endorsed. Does it not interest you that the Congress today, which has had such a key role in our nuclear program from 1974 onwards, has now changed its mind?
It's very interesting because no first use is the basis of India's nuclear identity. Correct. It is the basis of India's identity as a responsible nuclear power. It is the basis of the Indo-US nuclear deal. It is the basis of Jaswant Singh Talbot talks. No first use is integral to India's identity as a nuclear power. Now, I think for the Congress to make a shift from this position and clearly endorse there's an ambiguity now, as Vipin was saying, about no first use.
Is that because national security is an issue nobody is willing to debate on? It's this way or the highway. That whatever the government does is the way that needs to be followed.
national security there is a need for consensus on national security, but I think to bring in the nuclear issue at this point in the way it's being brought in is to miss the wood for the trees when the real work lies in Kashmir.
Does anybody really know what nuclear no first use is all about? Is that the real worry, that for many of our political leaders, I'm not talking about you, perhaps there is no understanding of what this means, that you blindly follow what the government has done, which might be a great step. But in terms of what your policy, your party has done for decades, you seem to have thrown that out the window.
No, actually, Vishnu, the no first use policy has not been jettisoned. I want you to understand the nuance of this. Nowhere to my understanding, as Mr. Rajnath Singh said, that from now on we are going to be proactive aggressors.
No, it's not been jettisoned. He's talked about the possibility.
Now, what he has said is, what he has said is that we will evaluate circumstances as they go along. Now, I want to say that in no first use policy, every country which is a nuclear weapons power, while making a public avowal to the effect that we will not use it volitionally or first or as an aggressor, takes into account the fact that there could be circumstances where for the self-defense of the country.
Then why have a doctrine that says no nuclear,
I'll tell you why. It's a doctrine of good faith. That
it's a doctrine of good faith which you're willing to breach depending on the circumstance. That's what you're suggesting.
Where the defense of the country is being jeopardized, you can breach. You will tweak it for the defense of the country, not to be an aggressor to another country. In other words, I want you to understand the tweet of Rajnath Singh, Mr. Rajnath Singh.
Sir, you're putting a spin on this, sir. It's a very clear issue over here. Either you have a nuclear no first use or you don't have it.
I think you're seeing it in a very brittle black and white polarity. No first use remains our policy. That's the way I interpret it. That's the way I interpret it.
But here is the defense minister in Pokhran on Vajpayee's death anniversary.
Yes.
All the symbolism over there saying, oh, we may reconsider it.
No, what he has said is it will depend on circumstances.
We need to look at it seriously. I'm not saying
and I've already made my position clear that we should not put in any element of ambiguity in our avowed policy of no first use. But I want to say no first use subsumes the idea of the defense of the country.
Okay, Vipin, is there confusion on what there should be perfect clarity on?
A couple of facts. So India has a declared no first use policy from the official doctrine in 2003. One other country, China, has a no first use policy as well, declared no first use policy. What's interesting was that Prime Minister Modi on the campaign trail said that India was the only country that had an NFU policy because for the same reason that Indian strategic analysts discount the validity of China's NFU, it's the same reason why everyone discounts India's, because when push comes to shove, as Bharat said, it's very difficult to constrain a state from acting in its national interest.
These are just words, right?
So, they're words. India's operational policy, I think, is best encapsulated by we won't be the first to use nuclear weapons, but we won't be the second. Right?
Which means nothing, right?
There's always been this discomfort over preemption, right? If there is detection,
I think that's
if there is a detection of adversary, whoever it is, China or Pakistan or anybody else using nuclear weapons against India, and this is what the language in the draft nuclear doctrine was, then India reserves a right to respond and go first, in the sense that preemption is consistent with no first use. And the Congress government's approach, I believe, was to try to say that preemption is actually not first use. It's consistent with the doctrine. What's, I think, a shift in the defense minister's statement today is he said, we'll actually just openly revise it and say, dispensing with this fitting preemption in with no first use. We'll just say, we'll revisit the circumstances under which we might consider first use. It may not just be preemption. I think the thing to watch out for is if there is a revision now, no country has ever rolled back a no first use policy. We'll leave the Soviet Union aside, but no country has actively done that, which would signal both to China and to Pakistan that India may reserve the right to use nuclear weapons first in conditions other than preemption, and that would be a big deal and a big shift.
Okay. Bharat Karnad, in terms of the timing of all of this, firstly, line of control, about 10 days back, there was artillery shelling. We've had a chief of defense staff announced yesterday, basically an indicator of a strident defense policy. We've had Balakot a few months back. We've had that air battle a day after that. And now you've got this statement. What is this indicative of? What is the larger message here?
Now look, I don't think you should read a larger message. The point to make here is, no, it's not, because you are trying to make shall we say, create a controversy where there isn't one.
Okay.
The point is that all declared and undeclared nuclear doctrines have a no first use, presumption. All.
Yes.
It's just that the Chinese are sort of semi-publicly have gone and made a declaratory stance. We have done so formally.
Yes.
And some of us had argued at the time it was made public we shouldn't have done so, because we get under political and public pressure to then disclose what the minimum deterrence is, when are you going to go first use, etc., etc. So this is a mistake we made. There's one thing I want to contest about Mr. Verma's theme, that there need not be ambiguity. In fact, deterrence works principally on the basis of ambiguity. Because
public consumption.
No, not public consumption, because anytime anyone from a government speaks, you see, and tries to reduce the ambiguity, you in a sense make it simpler for the adversary to read you.
Okay.
And your intent. And the thing you don't want the adversary to do is to read you plainly. And there has to be ambiguity to create
So
as
spelling
much
it out is
as
problematic.
much obfuscation as you
It
can,
has not
as
been
you must.
spelled out. It has not been spelled out.
Mr. Verma, then
that
Mr.
ambiguity remains.
In fact, I just want to say that if we want to project our image as a responsible nuclear weapons power, as a proponent of non-proliferation,
Then you shouldn't
there
have made this
should be no ambiguity in our trying to say that we will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. But I am saying that below that surface, what has been said today has always been a part of no first use policy.
Well, the
yes.
fundamental tension is, in order to reassure everybody that you're a responsible nuclear power, you need clarity on no first use. But to deter your primary adversaries, you need ambiguity about no first use.
Okay.
And squaring that circle is very difficult.
But isn't it just an unnecessary upping of the ante?
That's my question, the timing of all of this. What is it indicative of?
No, it's
What is this indicative
See,
of?
it doesn't indicate anything.
Now?
But
Why
how
at
does
this
it not indicate?
moment,
No, no. But
when
first,
you need to
just-
create
just
that
a-
new compact in Kashmir, which the Prime Minister himself spoke about in his Independence Day speech.
This is
Now we
not
can discuss
this,
Kashmir
this
and
is
the
not
economy
about
now.
Kashmir. This is vis-a-vis Pakistan and China.
Which
Please
has
remember
everything
that.
to do with
Let me-
what
let me-
Pakistan
let me
has been
come.
saying on
We are not
Kashmir.
debating among each
No, no, but please do debate.
let me answer. So this is a very clear signal about, and this is not rhetoric. Rhetoric is what Pakistan does.
Okay.
All kind of war-mongering, fear-mongering. But this is a clear policy statement which has come. Simple tweet, small statement. Yes, some amount of ambiguity. What would be the circumstances? Are these the circumstances or not? That has
We
been
can
left-
only guess, right?
We can only guess. And that's
Okay.
very good, as everybody I think on the panel
All right,
agrees.
one second. Priyanka Chaturvedi, go ahead. You've been waiting for a while. On the nuclear issue, was this really necessary at this stage?
No, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. Someone was here saying, I think it was Shagarika who was saying, oh, why are we falling down to the levels of Pakistan? I think we are showing Pakistan its level. That they have been, whenever we have been facing any kind of, distress coming from Pakistan, Pakistan has been threatening us with nuclear weapons that they would put to use to show India its place. So if we have asserted first use policy, I don't think there should be any kind of confusion or any kind of rattled feeling that some people are having here on the panel. My second point is, Pakistan has been an irresponsible nuclear country simply because it has been caught selling the nuclear technology to other countries, as well as threatening threatening India time and time again. So India has just asserted its presence, asserted itself, and said if there is any threat to our nation, we would also look back at our first use technology and change it if circumstances prevail the way they are at this point in time or in the future.
Okay,
and
one
the way
second,
Imran
Priyanka, I
Khan
just want to
has
go
been
across
using
to General.
propaganda, he has been pushing fake news,
Okay.
he's been aggressively tweeting.
Okay, General Kapoor, on the ground, what does this change? Assuming there is a change, again, let me repeat, assuming there is a change on the basis of the suggestion made by the Defence Minister, what does this mean for our armed forces? What does this mean for our posture against Pakistan?
Vishnu, first let me clarify that when we crossed carried out surgical strikes in Pakistan, there was always again a threat from their side that India is crossing the red lines. When we went across at the time of Balakot strikes, again there was a threat that India is crossing the red lines. And thirdly, when Article 370 and 35 alpha have been abrogated, there is a degree of frustration and a lot of saber rattling which is occurring within Pakistan. They have been trying all different means to try and rev up the pressure both at the domestic level and at the international level. The Pakistani army is also having kept Kashmir at the focus throughout for the last 70 years, is also duty bound to raise it up in one form or the other. And therefore, we've had the Prime Minister of Pakistan in the assembly as well as outside making indirect threats of the use of nuclear weapons. India sees nuclear weapons as a political weapon for deterrence purposes only. And from that point of view, no first use is totally correct, and we have been following it. But should circumstances change, as the RM has pointed out, I don't think we can foreclose the option of self-defense.
Okay.
Now, as far as the question of threat because of what has happened internally within J&K, that is the issue of abrogation of Article 370 and 35 alpha. Firstly, it's a domestic matter, and secondly, let's be very clear that when this kind of a thing has happened, there is very distinct possibility of a degree of unrest within the state of Jammu and
Okay, so we'll talk about
And
370 in
from
a
that
moment. In fact, I
perspective-
wanted to come to Sagarika on that. Moving away from the entire issue of what Rajnath Singh has said, there have been some important announcements made by the government. Restrictions are being reduced, more shopping, schools will be opened, the government offices will be opened in a phased way, and then there is a sentence over here which says telecom connectivity will gradually be restored in a phased manner, keeping in mind the constant threat which is posed by terrorists, etc., and using mobile connectivity. Does this reassure you that a sense of relative normalcy is going to happen soon?
No, it doesn't reassure me in the slightest. I think that the manner in which the government has completely done away with any kind of domestic consensus building does not behove the world's largest democracy. Now, I'm not saying that Article 370 wasn't a dead law, 35A, perhaps dead laws, but you've not just nullified 370 and 35A, you've broken up Jammu and Kashmir, you've made it into 2 union territories, and you've got the place under lock and key. They cannot communicate. Now, where is the process of domestic consensus building? Where is the all parties meeting? Where is the encouragement to local politicians, all of whom
So
are
the
under
answer
jail?
is that they've
If you
got a
don't
majority on this
have-
in the Lok Sabha and in this case in the Rajya
If you don't have domestic
Sabha.
consensus building,
They say
you're
that
not.
the consensus isn't what happened in Parliament.
No.
It's gone through.
It's gone through, and the
So
Prime
that is
Minister has
consensus.
made a speech about how he'll deliver prosperity, he will deliver Bollywood and industry and everything,
Yes.
all of this will go. But then on the ground, you are unable to trust the Kashmiri. You're saying you'll take Bollywood there, you'll take industry there, but then you see, there is a huge gap between what you're saying and what is actually happening.
My
because there's
question
no
to you, Mr.
trust
Varma, and I'm
of
sure
the
you'd
ordinary
follow up from
Kashmiri.
what she's saying or
That's what I'm
disagree
saying,
with
the
her.
trust deficit.
Where is the provision
Where is the
for
actual
political
process?
dissent on the ground going forward?
Where are the
Precisely, and
processes?
that is why our position is Article 370 is a fait accompli at the moment.
Yes.
It's been passed by
Yes,
both
going
houses.
forward, yes.
But we believe the means by which it was abrogated were a violation of specific provisions in the Constitution, in particular Article 3 and Part 3 of Article 370 itself. And therefore, the people of Jammu Kashmir were not, in the spirit of the Constitution, consulted.
Is this a concern that you've raised with the
that's a
BJP?
concern, and
Has the
therefore-
BJP not listened
And therefore, I
to
have a
its
very
allies?
radical suggestion to make to you, which I believe in. You have 8 million people who are sullen, angry and alienated in Jammu Kashmir, whether you admit it or not. Mr. Ajit Doval strolls through Srinagar having biryani don't really carry credibility in terms of the return to normalcy in Jammu Kashmir. Now, given that, ultimately, the first refuge of a essentially undemocratic act under the Constitution is to embrace democracy itself. In Jammu Kashmir, at the soonest rather than later,
Yes.
the government should carry out elections. Now, the
Alright.
people will be able, however angry they are, to vent. It's a safety valve to pent up
So
emotions.
elections are the...
Elections are the answer because they are flesh and
but
blood
shouldn't
citizens.
there first, as
I just want
Sagarika
to complete
points
my
out,
thought.
Priyanka, shouldn't there first be an effort to allow people to get back on the phone line, B,
Of
to
course,
release
after normalcy is
political
restored.
leaders
As soon as
as
possible.
well, or is there a sense that, look, the moment these political leaders, mainstream leaders come out, there'll be protests and then there'll be violence, so what does one do? Keep them locked up forever?
No, I don't think that's the right way to go ahead, and I'm sure this is not the permanent method that is going to be used. We will see normalcy restore. We are seeing that happen from Monday onwards. Of course, there has to be some kind of unhappiness about how it was executed. But I believe the kind of protests that we have seen, there have been no protests. There have been, thankfully, and I would say fortunately, no deaths reported. So I would believe that people of Kashmir, ma'am, please, I wasn't interrupting you. This is not how debates are conducted. Be polite to someone else's point of view as well. Every point of view is just not yours. So all I would like to mention here is that whether we discuss 35A, I'm sure Sagarika also knows how Section 35A was brought into the Constitution. It came via an ordinance. Were the stakeholders in Kashmir
No, but
asked?
I think Sagarika does Priyanka raise a very important question. The question is very simple. If there are 75,000 boots on the ground, how do you expect people to voice their opinion?
Therefore, elections.
Fair enough. No, I'm very certain that all the security forces would be withdrawn too, considering this is a very important decision that was taken. And, it was a controversial decision, but it was a much needed decision to be taken to ensure that we work as one nation, one constitution. Nobody enjoys a special status simply because it goes against the federal structure of this country too. So if we have brought every state at par, I believe there could be some kind of unhappiness, but in the long run, this is going to lead to better development, better assimilation and inclusiveness of people of Jammu and Kashmir and people, the rest of the country.
Mr. Bajwa, would you agree with that? This is all about assimilation and ultimately help or assistance or integration for India and Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. That's what the Shiv Sena has to say. Or do you believe that this is all wrong, the way people have been detained?
See, what I feel, it's completely wrong how people have been detained. Firstly, they have rubbed the nose of the Kashmiris in the sand, as you would say. They have made a state into union territory. Number two, I fully agree with what Mr. Pavan Verma is saying. The best way now is open up their houses, let them come out, restore peace over there, and there should be immediate elections. The people will then see, if you are able to restore peace, a lasting peace in Kashmir, then you could say the policy of the BJP has succeeded. So for that, only elections are the true answer. Let the people go over there, vote, and then we'll see what happens.
General Kapoor, would you agree with what Pavan Verma says? Hold elections sooner than later. Hold elections, General Kapoor, sooner than later. Let there be dissent and let people decide.
I fully agree with Mr.
Right, I just want to go. I asked that to General Kapoor.
Yeah, that is how it should be.
Okay, one second. General Kapoor, will you answer that?
This is the way.
Vishnu, let's get the proper perspective. If you go back to 3rd and 4th August, before Article 370 was abrogated and discussed in the Parliament, you had local leaders of political parties declaring that Kashmir will go up in flames, it will explode, etc. And you combine with that with the kind of support being provided from across the border by the Pakistan Army and the ISI to the people in the valley in terms of military, moral and economic support. So there was definitely an apprehension that there may be trouble which may be created. Hence, to lock down the valley for a limited period, for a temporary period, was important. And those of the separatist leaders who were inciting people to go on the rampage, I think that is why this step had been taken. And it is a matter of time. If the government is thinking in terms of relaxing these restrictions and bringing back normalcy step by step, I think that's the right step to take.
Sagarika, you had a point to make?
Meantime, people are also
You know,
people are
you've
also
jailed people
reconciled
who,
to the fact that it is.
One second, General. Yes, Sagarika.
you've jailed people who all their lives have been actually promoting India's cause in the valley, who have been putting their lives on the line against the separatists, who have been putting their lives on the line against Pakistan-sponsored militants. They have been championing India's cause in the valley, and they are the people who are now under house arrest. They are the people who are now without access to any form of communication.
Right.
Now, what does this do to your own political agenda in the valley? Who are you going to have as your political representative
Would you
in
like
the
to
valley?
respond to that last on this before we move to the economy?
Let me
Yes.
tell you, to add to what General Kapoor was saying, this is exactly the inflammatory speeches that were given, highly provocative, and this is a preventive detention. It's not for permanent. And their role in Abdullah's role in 97 elections and the promotion of terrorism is a very clear-cut example what they can do. Now, secondly, let me come to
The role of the Abdullahs in terrorism. Is that
Abdullah's
I'll tell you,
terrorism.
the elections in 19. Let me
Omar Abdullah has been a junior minister for external
let me
affairs.
tell you. Let me finish my point.
People who have been stakeholders in
They were
democracy.
allies, sir. They were the allies of the BJP.
Please. Abdullah's the election in 1987 was rigged. Farooq Abdullah was brought, and terrorism.
But then that didn't stop the BJP from allying with them in the past.
Yes, it's
You've
fine.
been
It didn't
allied
stop
both
Omar
No,
BJP
it's
Abdullah
fine.
from being a
and
minister
It's
of
fine.
state for
BNC and
external
PDP.
affairs.
As a strategy to understand the system out there, BJP did ally and took valuable lessons from that alliance, and which has ultimately led to the abrogation of 370.
So they're terrorists now. The Abdullahs.
No, I'm not
the
saying
National
terrorists.
Conference are
I'm never
terrorists.
saying it's a preventive detention because of the inflammatory and provocative speeches that they have made immediately on 3rd and 4th August, as General Kapoor was saying.
Okay.
Now slow easing of tension of these restrictions. Restrictions is absolutely necessary. It allows the government to watch it very carefully, also to identify miscreants, and secondly, also allow Kashmiris to tell them that nothing has happened to your identity.
Okay.
Your identity is still the same.
Right.
So that's the message which the government is sending, and you know the
But
steps
how
which
do
are
we
being.
know what they think of their identity if we can't hear them speak?
Therefore, slow, easy, easing of restriction is being done.
And today is Vajpayee's first death anniversary, and Vajpayee spoke of Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat, Kashmiriyat.
Right. That's gone. We may as well not be discussing
to
that, right?
remember
No, it is
those
still
words,
there. It is still there.
remember those words,
It is
and to
still
have
there.
silence in the
My
valley
only
is what
worry-
is deeply
worry is-
ironic.
So where is the insaniyat in
My
locking up
only-
political
my only
leaders?
worry
What a
is-
lot of
Why?
people would
If
ask.
you make anywhere in India, if you make provocative and inflammatory speeches,
But what speeches did they make?
they said बारूद में आग लग जाएगी, हाथ जल जाएगा, शरीर जल जाएगा if you remove 370. This is the kind of speeches.
What did
Mufti-
the National Conference, Farooq Abdullah or Omar Abdullah say? What did Mehbooba Mufti say prior
Yeah,
to
on
them
third
being detained, arrested
No,
and taken
on
to a
3rd or 4th
sub-jail?
August, she made such statements.
But could they not have first been taken into conference in a domestic
See, this is a decision was taken.
consensus
So
built?
what they said prior
That's the
to
issue.
this decision being announced was enough to lock them up after
no
this decision was
consultation,
announced.
no
Even though they
talks,
had no idea what was
stakeholders
coming.
reach out.
No, they had. I think they had very clear idea.
How did they have any idea?
Because they
Nobody
said
seemed to know
आग
until
लग
it was
जाएगी,
announced.
बारूद में आग लग जाएगी if 370 is removed.
Okay.
My,
Mr. Verma, quickly, I need to move to the economy.
Yeah, I
Yes.
just want to say that I think it's time for, at the prime ministerial level, to take the right political initiative with Jammu Kashmir. My worry is, and 10 seconds only, you see, if you leave it to law and order authorities only to judge the situation, the pace of incrementalism will be so slow that I don't think that it will give the people of Jammu Kashmir a chance to return to the democratic mainstream of India. And I think the best antidote to the current
Elections.
situation is democracy.
Okay. Professor Arun Kumar, you would have listened very carefully to what the Prime Minister said yesterday, $5 trillion. You've already said how that is unrealistic. 100,000 crore rupee investment, dollar investment in, no, 100,000 crore rupee investment in infrastructure. The question that's been asked is, where is that going to actually come from? Do you believe this was political grandstanding?
Yes, as I said, 100 lakh crores implies that in the coming 5 years you have 20 lakh crores every year, whereas at the moment you have about 8.5 lakh crores of capital investment. So in the last year you'd have to have 32 lakh crores, that means a 400% increase in investment, which is very unlikely. So this is not on, but the question is, why did we get to this stage where the economy is slowing down so rapidly?
Yes.
And that is because in the last 3 years there have been 3 big shocks to the economy. First the demonetization, then the GST, and then the NBFC crisis that has hit the unorganized sector. And each one of them hit the unorganized sector, which employs 94% of the workforce, which produces 45% of the output. If such a large sector gets impacted, it also affects demand for food, and that's why agriculture went into a crisis. So unorganized sector and agriculture both facing crisis, and that demand shortage has now come to the organized sector, and that's why all the organized sector is also facing a crisis, whether it be freight movement, whether it be cement industry, whether it be automobile sector, FMCG sector, etc. So in a sense, the government has been in denial that there's been a crisis in the economy. It's been saying we are the fastest growing economy, whereas actually the rate of growth has been slipping. So in effect, if you want to correct for it, you need to admit what the data is. And because the data was not admitted in the last budget, we had a shortfall in revenue of 1.6 lakh crores, which meant cutback in expenditure. And also because of the demand shortage, your capacity utilization is low, as the RBI data shows, and it's slipping further. And when capacity utilization is low, investment doesn't take place.
So you've summarized this with point after point after point of fact in the 3 minutes which I've allowed you to speak on. Priyanka, was this a Prime Minister appealing to aspirations without necessarily substantively pointing out how he was going to achieve this? If you have a leader who is as powerful a speaker as Narendra Modi, with the occasion being Independence Day, making promises, is he not in a sense like every other Prime Minister we've had for so many decades, using that opportunity to say whatever he wants, and then patriotism sort of drives people into believing that, look, this is what's going to happen, Achhe din will arrive. In fact, as the professor points out, we are in the doldrums in our economy. Did the Prime Minister really have to grandstand in this manner?
No, okay, the August 15th speech that came from the ramparts of Red Fort came at the back of abrogation of Article 370. So, of course, patriotism was at its peak. Now, secondly, of course, I'm sure the Prime Minister and his entire cabinet understands the challenges the economy is facing. And they would have to incentivize investments for economy to pick up. There are certain challenges in the automobile sector, and everybody is reading that data. And I'm very certain whatever commitment he is making from the Red Fort, he would try and live up to those, because whatever leadership that he has shown, and youth has been tremendously attracted to whatever he has been promising, we are assuming that he would also understand the challenges that come with the promises he has made, and he will live up to those challenges as well, is our belief.
Okay. Deshratna Nikam, how would you respond to the points mentioned by the professor that for all of these parameters, the economy is
I'm
in
not
trouble?
an economist, but I can give you a generalist answer. But look at, there are certain sectors which are doing good also. Say, for example, energy, healthcare. So all is not so bleak as being painted with the same brush. Yes, there is a global recession and slowdown in economy. That effect is also showing on India. So, and certainly, I think the Prime Minister is aware of those things, and especially in the field of automobile sector and the reality sector. And even today, he met the group consisting of finding solutions, and probably some kind of incentives or package seems to be on the way. So what I believe, these are dynamic situations and dynamic decisions have to be taken, not that you take a decision in the budget and it's frozen. So these mid-term corrections can also be there. So what I feel is a hope which the Prime Minister has given, and the certain corrections that have come.
So story abhi baki hai, is that essentially what you're saying?
Like GST rate cuts can be implemented in auto sector.
Professor Kumar, is anything that he's mentioning convincing you that it's all going to be okay in the future?
No, I mean, it doesn't look like we have the resources, and the package has to be for the unorganized sector, whereas we are talking about the package for the organized sector. It's the unorganized sector where the problem began, and we didn't admit that. If we don't do something for the unorganized sector, we don't do something for employment generation, if 94% of the employment is getting affected adversely and their demand is coming down, we need to boost employment generation, especially in the unorganized sector. Now, that is where the micro sector is very critical. Micro sector is 99% of all units.
Yes.
And we don't have a package for the micro sector. So even if we give a package to the automobile sector, or if we cut GST for the automobile sector, that's not going to revive the economy. That's not going to revive the demand in the unorganized sector, which is what is required. So in effect, we are plugging the wrong set of policies because they're not admitting where the problem began.
Okay. Sagarika, last comments, yes.
I just want to say that the Prime Minister practices the politics of the glass is half full. He always emphasizes the positives. He always talks up the economy,
But
$5
every Prime
trillion
Minister does
economy.
that.
Yeah, but he does it even more with a great deal of dramatic effect. But he never actually tells
last
us
line,
how we're going to get there. As Arun is saying, how are we going to kickstart demand? How are we going to kickstart consumption? How are we going to address the unemployment crisis? How are we going to address the banking crisis? How is the economy actually going to be pulled out of the doldrums? Because business leaders are now coming out and actually saying it. The slowdown is so bad that business leaders are saying it.
You have 30 seconds,
So
and I
how
mean
are we
it, I'm
going to
not
do
kidding.
that?
The Prime Minister is a dynamic leader. He has his ear to the ground. Vishnu, the bottom line in
What
this
about
country,
all those who've lost their jobs in the auto sector?
I'm just
3
coming
lakh
to
and
that. I'm
counting.
just coming
Has
to
he
that.
heard their voices?
Just coming to that, Vishnu. You took away 10 seconds for no
I'll
rhyme
give
or
you
reason.
10 more.
I'm finishing. Bottom line for this country is the economy is stupid. You can have one emotional cause after the other. But ultimately, dhanda and rozgar, they are the bottom line in terms of people's satisfaction.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. A bit of an unwieldy program in terms of its spread, but the issues are important and come at a time when there is so much aspiration among millions of people in our country, so much expectation as well. Who's going to deliver? Do we have realistic policies at the level of our national security? Do we have realistic policies in terms of our economy? Where is our Kashmir policy going to take us in the days, weeks and the years ahead? I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us on The Big Fight. Thank you very much indeed.